Hey, welcome back to the CommonGround North Dakota Podcast. I'm Heather.
And I'm Jen.
I've been a chef for 10 years.
And I'm a registered dietitian. We've all heard the saying, farm to table. But what if the conversation was table to farm?
Join Jen and I as we sit down with ag experts to dig in and find out more about North Dakota agriculture. All right, welcome back to CommonGround North Dakota Podcast. I'm Heather.
I'm Jen.
And we're here for another episode.
We are. We learned a lot last time about grain merchandising.
Grain merchandising.
I didn't know that was a thing.
I know. I guess I should have known because someone was saying that at the end of the news that they always talk about grain prices. Am I not paying attention?
Well, I haven't watched the news for a while, so I probably missed something.
Now I'm going to pay attention.
Right.
Yes.
And today we're learning about soil fertility.
Yes, which we have a lot of questions.
We do.
Because when Sarah was in, she kind of set the tone with the soil.
She introduced the possibility that there was more to learn.
Mm-hmm. But now we really want to dig in.
We do.
Yes, get dirty.
We do. Yes. But it's not dirt, it's soil.
Soil.
Yes.
Oh, right. Is that a faux pas?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
soil.
It is.
Soil.
So Kelsey is here.
Hi, Kelsey.
To help us learn all about soil fertility.
Soil fertility.
So Kelsey, tell us about that.
I'm assistant professor of soil fertility. And why we care about fertility is because we care about eating, right?
Yes.
And there's nutrients that plants need. And so if those plants don't have the nutrients, then it's not going to grow. And if it doesn't grow, we're not going to have food. So that's kind of the gist of it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm at NDSU. I'm 30% teaching, 70% research. So 30% of my job is teaching courses, but the majority is research and soil fertility.
Oh, wow.
Not dirt fertility, soil fertility.
And I will not say that again. I do apologize. My bad. So what types of stuff are you researching right now?
So the goal of my research program is to increase uptake efficiency of nutrients.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I work with nitrogen. And the reason why I want to do that is because if we increase the uptake of the nutrient into the crop, we're helping the producer, right?
Yep.
Because fertilizer is expensive. We want to get the most of that resource into the crop.
Mm-hmm.
But the other side of it is if we're getting the most of that fertilizer into the crop, that also means we're leaving the least amount of it in the soil where it can be lost and become a pollutant. So it's kind of a win-win situation when we increase efficiency. It's good for the producer, for their bottom line, but it's also good for the environment because we're not putting fertilizer out there that doesn't need to be out there.
Sure.
So increasing the absorbency of the nutrients from the soil to the plant?
Yes. So increasing the amount of the fertilizer that gets into the crop.
Okay. Wow.
How do you do that?
Well, there's lots of different ways, and there's also lots of different ways to decrease efficiency as well.
Okay.
Most of my research is using something called N15, which is a stable heavy isotope.
Okay.
And I use it as a tracer to trace where the fertilizer applications are going.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, I can say, oh, look, we applied it in this way and more of it got into the crop. And we applied it in this way and not very much of it got into the crop. And then I can give that information to the producers and say, hey, maybe we should be applying it this way and not this way so we can increase efficiency.
So what are some of those ways that fertilizers applied?
So there's a couple different ways you can change your applications. You can change it by adjusting when you apply the nitrogen. So do you apply it before you plant or do you apply it when the crop is in the ground? There's also other ways like where you place it. So am I broadcasting it on the surface of the soil or am I knifing it in? That's another way to adjust efficiency. You can apply different forms of nitrogen. But really the cool thing about efficiency and what I have seen in my research is how you increase efficiency is trying to mimic the soil supply.
Okay.
In other words, you need to have a slow release or spoon feeding of the fertilizer as opposed to hitting it all with a huge load of fertilizer all at once.
Oh, that makes sense. Because it's kind of like vitamins, right?
Yes.
Like they always
you
say,
can only absorb
get
so
it
much
from your food.
Yep.
So it's natural. Okay. That makes sense.
The example I use in class is and maybe you guys can give me a better example. Maybe this is a good example.
All right.
But I always tell my students, I'm like, if I told you have to drink a gallon of water in a day, and I tell you have to either drink all the water in the first hour of the day or drink in 8-ounce increments throughout the day, which do you think is going to be better?
Well, right. The 8-ounce.
The 8 ounces
throughout the day.
Same with protein. Right. I say that with my athletes. It's better to eat a little bit throughout the day. That's what my research says, versus have it all at once. Because like, again, it's like your body can only tolerate so much. And you're saying that for plants and soil too, it's better in smaller increments. More is not better.
More is not better.
So how are you testing soil fertility?
Yes.
What goes into that?
Well, testing soil fertility is complex.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that because that not only makes my life interesting, but it also gives me job security, right?
Yeah.
But the reason why it's difficult is, and something that maybe people who aren't working in soils don't realize, is just because you have a nutrient in the soil does not mean it's in a form that can be taken up.
Oh.
And so it's not as simple as, let's measure how much nitrogen is in the soil. And then, well, that's easy. Now we can just know how much is in the soil. So it's more complex than that. And I'm sure working in nutrition, you probably come across that with people too, right? I mean,
bioavailability.
Just because you take vitamin D doesn't mean you're going to take it up, right? I mean,
right? Absolutely. Or the types of iron in your diet, heme and non-heme, one's better absorbed than the other. Yeah, absolutely. So that's true of soils then too. So then, like, do you test the soil and do you test for like types of nitrogen?
Yeah. So kind of like the history of soil fertility as a science.
Yeah.
Whenever we first started looking at soils, back before I was alive, right? This is a long time ago. They would look at just the total concentration. They looked at that and they said, this doesn't really work quite right. It's not correlating to yield, things like that. And so then what they tried to do was imitate the plant with chemistry. So they would take the soil sample, they would apply a very gentle acid to the soil to try to imitate the acidifying process of what a plant does.
Okay.
And that was a step in the right direction, but it still wasn't quite right. The really big shift in soil fertility happened when a guy named Ray from my alma mater, the University of Illinois, came up with this idea that we need to measure the pools of nutrients that are being taken up by the plant.
Okay.
So there's different forms of all these different nutrients. And he came up with the idea that we need to identify those pools and measure them.
Because that's what's being used. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is the basic philosophy of most of our soil tests today.
Yeah. So measure what matters.
Measure what matters.
Exactly.
And that's different for whatever you're growing.
Yes. So generally speaking, most nutrients, they're going to be taken from the same pools, but they might need more of a certain nutrient than others. A great example of that is canola. Canola loves sulfur. And so it needs a lot more sulfur than, say, corn or soybean or things like that. So there are differences in crops for sure.
So does that, I mean, I would imagine that then the producers are curious about their soil fertility because it goes into what will be the best crop to grow on that piece of land. And I would guess that it depends on the area that you're farming.
Yeah. So I come from Illinois. I grew up in central Illinois, and I actually just moved to North Dakota and have been learning about the soils in North Dakota. And I will say we have some crazy differences in our soils in North Dakota. You like you guys just said, eastern part of the state, we have these soils that were formed during glaciation by a lake that was formed by a glacier. You go out to the western parts of the state and we have areas that are not even glaciated. And I think when you drive across North Dakota, you probably realize that, that we have different soils. Deeper soils here on the eastern part of the state, more shallow soils if you go over to the western part of the state. And that absolutely will affect the crops that are grown. And something that I want my introduction to soil students to come away from is the understanding that if we have different soil types, the only conclusion is that we have to manage those soils differently.
Okay. Yes.
So it's not just that we recognize there's different soils, but that has to be included in how we manage our soils as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of like your 101 class,
yes.
I mean, think of Heather and I
Teach us
like your 101 students, because we pretty much are. So what are some other things that you would want them to come away with after taking that class?
I think the other thing that I'd want them to come away with is just to understand that soils is a beautiful science, and that you have chemistry, you have biology, you have physics, things like hydrology come into play. There's so many different things that come in. What ends up happening for my Soil 210 students is basically I spend a lecture and then I tell them I could teach a whole course on what I'm trying to convey right now.
Wow.
So we don't really get to get into some of the deeper topics. And I think the other thing I try to convey is that there's jobs to be had, right? Soils, they're everywhere, right?
Yeah. Yes.
They're literally everywhere. And they need to be managed properly. Whether you're talking about an ecosystem or whether you're talking about an agricultural system, they both need to be managed. And to do that, it's really tricky because you can't be just a biologist and look at soils. You have to be a chemist. You have to be a physical scientist. And to me, that's exciting. I think to some of my Soil 210 students, it's more intimidating than exciting.
It's a lot to know.
It is.
So what made you interested in this job?
I grew up in a rural community. I grew up in a small town in central Illinois, actually like 10 miles away from the geographical center. So if you put your finger right in the middle of Illinois, that's probably my hometown. And I always knew that agriculture was going to be a part of my life.
Okay.
I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was 18, which I think is true of most of us at 18.
Yep.
So I asked one of my teachers that I respected, I said, what do you think I should study? And he said, I think you should study crop sciences. There's a lot of jobs in crop sciences.
Okay, good advice.
Yeah, I did that. I started in biotech. So I was taking genetic engineering courses and things like that. And part of my degree, I had to take a soils class. I took that soils class and I fell in love with the material. I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It was like light bulb moment. And basically I went up to my professor and I said, hey, can I have a job? I really like this class. And he gave me a job in his lab.
That's great.
And I started doing research in his lab as an undergraduate and basically just stayed.
Wow.
Stayed
And
there.
this was University of Illinois?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, University of Illinois.
Good for you. Wow. You're proactive. I love that.
Yeah. I was like, hey, if you like it, you have to start somewhere, right? So I started washing dishes. That's where I started.
Yeah.
So soil, we always brag about our soil here in the Red River Valley.
We do.
Are we always going to have good soil here in the Red River Valley? Like, could we deplete all the nutrients and then not be able to brag anymore?
That is certainly possible. And that has actually happened numerous times in civilization over and over and over and over again. One of the best examples I can think of is back when we had Mesopotamia, right? When it was over in the Middle East, I believe. We had Mesopotamia. There was a civilization there. And they had a situation where they had rich, fertile soil. And it was basically a situation where they had a plain, rich, fertile soil. And then there were slide slopes next to the plain. And they built irrigation systems and were farming, and they, grew their populations more and more and more. As their populations grew, they could no longer farm just the rich plains, and they had to start farming on the slopes, and they degraded their soil in that way, basically causing a lot of erosion. They clogged up their irrigation systems, and the rest is history. So yeah, that's certainly happened. It's happened in Greece. It's happened in the Middle East. And so that's something that could happen.
So another aspect of your job is to think, how do we keep this soil healthy and fertile?
Yeah, so there's kind of two separate fields. There's the field of soil health and the field of soil fertility.
Oh, those are separate.
We actually just hired a soil health professor here in our department. So they are separate.
Okay.
However, there's so much crossover.
Right.
Yeah.
We work together. Me and Kirsten is her name, Dr. Butcher. We're co-advising a student, and there's a lot of crossover, but they are different.
Sure.
Okay. So another question that comes to mind, like fertilizers that you put on, like, do you spray it? Do you spread it? Like, I'm from the spreading. Like,
well, and she mentioned, like, what did you say? Like using to stick it right
like
in,
to knife it in.
Knife it in. Never heard that one before.
Yeah. Like, so are there concerns to the environment? You know, that's probably one of the hot questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does it all get absorbed, and then does it go into the water? You know, all these questions.
Well, and this is exciting because we have an expert here doing research. What do you say?
It is basically impossible or unheard of that all of the fertilizer gets into the crop.
Okay.
It does not happen. That does not happen.
Okay.
So a couple of things. How do we apply it?
Yeah.
So one of the more common, actually, I will say the most common fertilizer in the United States, not globally, but in the United States, is anhydrous ammonia.
Okay.
Anhydrous ammonia is NH3. It is a toxic liquefied gas.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to knife it in. And when I say knife it in, literally we have knives with a port at the back end, and you're putting it under the soil surface. You cannot do it any other way, because if you don't have that soil contact, it's a gas. It's just going to go up into the air.
Okay.
Which is really inefficient.
Yes.
Wasting money there.
Yes. Not going to get any benefit from that.
Right. We also have some other fertilizers. Urea ammonium nitrate, or UAN is one. This is a liquid.
Okay.
You can apply that on the surface, but there is a risk of something called ammonia volatilization, which is another situation where you can have basically the nitrogen be lost into the atmosphere.
Okay.
Which is not good.
Right.
So that's why some people will still knife in or incorporate. So they'll apply it and then go in and till it into the soil.
Okay.
Not lost.
Are there still like people that spread manure as fertilizer? Oh,
for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually a really good strategy, because you're applying it with a carbon source as well, right? So there's this play in soil fertility where carbon and nitrogen are best friends. They cycle together. You cannot talk about nitrogen management and not talk about carbon, and vice versa. And so if you supply that carbon, you're helping the system retain more of that nitrogen.
Okay.
And this is why crop rotation is so important too?
Yep. So classic rotation of corn and soybean, right?
Yeah.
Whenever we apply, or whenever we grow corn, you know, you can get a pretty penny for corn, right? It can be a good crop to grow, but there's so much carbon. And you probably know this when you drive by a field and you notice the corn residue, right? It stays for a long time.
It does.
Well, it just sits there.
Yeah.
If you look at soybean residue, it disappears really quickly, right?
Yeah.
The reason is because there's more carbon in that corn residue than in the soybean residue. All that carbon is really hard for the microorganisms in the soil to decompose.
So then you'd rotate. That's why they rotate, so they don't have like corn on corn on corn.
It helps with pest management and things like that as well. Like if you have, you know, a weed that's a broadleaf, growing soybean continuously could be an issue, because you could have, you know, lots of weeds, and there's lots of other reasons why we do rotations. But from a fertility aspect, that's definitely one of them.
And then with soybeans, I remember talking with one of our guests. I don't know if it was Scott or someone else, but they talked about like the nitrogen modules on the soybean root. And does that then help with the corn?
So soybeans fix nitrogen.
Okay,
which is really good, because 78% of our atmosphere, like what we're breathing in right now, is a 78% nitrogen, which is really unfortunate, because that nitrogen is triple bonded.
Okay.
In other words, that nitrogen, we can't use it very easily because in order to use it, we have to break that triple bond. But there's a microbe that can make a relationship with the soybean that performs that reaction, which is really, really awesome.
Oh.
So the problem is that it's not necessarily that soybean is taking nitrogen from the air and fixing it in the soil. They're using it for themselves. But that is a way in which if we have residue, that if that is reincorporated in the soil, we can have what we call a soybean credit. So we won't need as much nitrogen in the following growing season.
Okay.
So they're not as selfish as I thought initially.
Yeah. Corn,
they share some.
Let me tell you, corn is a baby. It needs everything.
Okay.
It takes all the nutrients. Yeah.
Okay. So do these things change? So if the seed evolves, if the seed changes, then you have to go back and do research and see how that new plant is affected? That's
a really good question. So I actually have a project right now that I'm working on with our soybean breeder. So I'm not a breeder. That's a whole nother different field, but I like to work with those people, right?
Okay.
It's always good to work with people that know how to do things you don't know how to do.
Yes.
And so what we're trying to look at is looking to see, I should step back. So one issue with soybeans, specifically in the western part of the state of North Dakota, is the N2 fixation is inhibited a lot over in the western part because of the lack of moisture. Basically, the plant doesn't have, as much of an incentive to create that symbiotic relationship. And so, the amount of N2 fixation is much lower in the western part of the state because of that moisture deficit.
Okay.
And so our breeders are working really, really hard to find seed that overcome those issues. Absolutely. That's why they're really, really important. And they're definitely working on that. As far as the different varieties affecting my work, it certainly does affect fertility. You can have some seeds or some varieties that will take up nutrients really quickly, or some that are, more stable and slow over time. That's not generally something that I include in my research, but it's definitely something that affects it.
Okay. Wow. Lots of chemistry and biotechnology. Like you said, there's a lot of different things that go into soil fertility.
And coming from Illinois, what were the biggest differences you saw in North Dakota soil as opposed to Illinois soil? So the soils aren't too terribly different in the eastern part of North Dakota.
Okay.
Where we have these really deep profiles. And when I say deep profiles, I mean, if you were to take a shovel and start digging, it's going to be black soil pretty deep down. Whereas if you're in the western part of the state, you start digging, you're going to run out of that black soil pretty quickly. So that's what I mean when I say deep soil.
Okay.
The biggest difference for me has been the climate. A shorter growing season, that puts a lot more stress on our cropping systems because you have to get in and get out of the field quickly. You don't have a lot of choices in terms of waiting to put something on or not. And I think that has probably been the biggest change for me. And then the other one is we grow corn or soybean in Illinois. That's basically it. We do have other crops, but not very much. And as you guys probably know, there's tons of different crops up here in North Dakota. Tons and tons.
And they're all affecting the soil differently.
Yes. They're all affecting the soil differently, and the soil is affecting them differently.
Man. Such a complex situation here.
Okay, so you're in the classroom, you're teaching, you're doing your research, and are you bringing that research into the classroom to kind of keep your students up to date?
Yes, for sure. So that's one benefit of coming to a university like NDSU is some of the stuff I'm teaching on, I'm doing research in, which is really beneficial to the student because they're getting up-to-date information.
Yeah.
I would argue that it's easier for me to be passionate about those topics as well because it's something that I research. One challenge I have with Soil 210 is I have to limit how much time I spend on things.
Okay.
Because when I get to nitrogen, oh man, I could talk forever about nitrogen and the students would hate it and get bored. So that is my main challenge, I would say, is just making sure that I'm staying on task.
Well, and keeping them engaged and and like interested in different things, but like higher level than maybe you're used to, because it seems like you have to dig pretty deep into the soil to get all the facts that you need for your research.
Yeah. I think that's something that drew me to soils too, is chemistry and math are difficult. I struggled with chemistry and math in high school.
Oh, bless you.
The minute it became applied, I was like, oh,
makes sense.
Okay.
Then it clicked.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I think that's exciting to see in the students, to see them, maybe be afraid of chemistry or math and then get to apply it and be like, oh, okay, this makes sense to me, or I can feel this, or I can see this.
Yes.
Because I think abstract chemistry and math is very intimidating, even to me. I
would agree with you 100%.
Yes. And so I'm imagining you doing your research. So what do you do? Are you taking this plant and like taking a part of the plant? Like, break it down for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So overall, what I'm doing is I am identifying a need that the producers have. So they have an issue.
Okay.
So I identify the need, and then I design a project that answers the need.
Okay.
Then I write grants so that I can do the project. And then I do the project, and sometimes we'll include, graduate students. I have a research specialist, Joel Bell, who's great. He helps me a lot. And then we get the data, analyze it, report it. So write a scientific article and publish it. So overall, that's what I'm doing.
But that takes time. Like that whole process, a year, 2 years.
Oh gosh. I mean, so with agricultural research, you typically want to have at least 2 growing seasons of data.
At least 2.
Oh, wow.
Because the climate will change and you have those variables. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And so 3 years.
3 years.
3 to 4 to 5 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Depends on the project.
Yeah.
I do have, so part of my research that I don't hardly ever talk about because people get a little bit bored is I do lab work as well. So I build methodologies for soil tests as well. Those are a little bit quicker, right?
Okay.
But you're still talking, 9 months to a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Takes time.
Yeah.
Well, and so they're coming to, so what sort of problem are you working on right now for a producer?
A couple of projects I'm working on now, or I have in the pipeline, I will say. I have a data set looking at the fate of fall applied anhydrous ammonia. So it's a type of application, and I'm measuring where that fertilizer application has gone in the soil. So that's one. And that project actually started by a producer asking me a question.
Okay.
I was at I think it was like a conference or something, and there was a producer that came up to me and a couple other people, and he said, how much of this fall applied anhydrous is actually getting into the crop? Super simple question. Not very easy to answer. So that actually sparked a really big project that I did. And I had 3 or 4 publications come out of that.
Okay.
Wow.
And so that's something that I've been working on. Up here at NDSU, I'm focusing on topics that are more important to the state.
Okay.
I had one project that's in the proposal line for looking at tillage. So how does tillage affect our fertilizer applications?
Okay.
Oh, they do. But we want to know specifically how, right?
Sure.
And so we have a project in line for that. Lots of other projects looking at issues that are specific to North Dakota, but most of them have a field component.
Okay. And you mentioned writing grants for your research too. So do you write those, or do you have somebody that helps you with that?
No, I write them. So we do have a fantastic grant coordinator.
Okay.
And her name is Susan, and she helps me make sure that I'm following everything I need to in terms of the budget and getting the materials together.
Okay.
It's quite like job applications,
yes.
kind of.
Right.
Plus a big document.
Yes.
Where people want it in different formats, and there's all these formatting details. And so she does a really great job helping with that. But in terms of writing the grant, that's definitely something the professor or researcher would do.
Oh, wow.
You have a lot
Communications,
going on. Yes.
I feel like, is important. English classes, along with, some biotech and chemistry and math and all of the different things. But Yeah, it sounds like you found your niche area.
Definitely. And that's something that I communicate to the 210 students. You spend 35% of your waking hours at your job.
Right.
Most of us probably more than that.
Right.
So, man, it's really important that you like a job.
Absolutely.
That's so important.
Yep. And finding your path. I love that you weren't sure, and then you took that one class and you just like you explained, like a light bulb came on.
And took advantage of it.
Yeah. And understood that, at a young age, I still feel like, and kind of went with it. So that's exciting to find your path and just go forward.
Yes.
And love what you do. And we can tell.
Yeah. Well, and if not for this job, where else would someone that has studied soil fertility work?
There's academia, and there's multiple layers to academia, right? Like you could be a professor, you could be a research technician, you could be just a visiting scholar and go other places. There could be a postdoc. So there's lots of layers in academia, but there's lots of jobs outside of academia.
Okay.
So some of those might be working for the USDA, right? So we have people who work in soils who work for the USDA or the NRCS, more government type positions. You could also work for industry. We have a lot of companies who are really interested in soils right now. All the big companies that you might imagine, Bayer, Corteva, all those bigger ones. And then there's also a lot of work in soil testing labs as well. So the big soil testing lab here locally would be AgVice. Okay. And that would be another potential place you could get a job. So lots of different job opportunities in soils. And again, I'm just talking about the more of the agricultural systems type jobs. There's also jobs in conservation as well.
Oh, sure.
It's a fascinating field, and just the layers. I keep going with these puns today, but I can't help it. The layers of depth with agriculture that we're learning here, I think is important for consumers to understand the work that goes into feeding the world.
Yeah. It takes a lot of effort, and it's being done with a purpose, right? I think some people hear fertilizers or chemicals or whatever being put on a field, and that's scary or intimidating, or what are those chemicals, or what are we doing? And there's purpose behind it.
Yes.
The producers have a huge incentive to not over apply a resource. That is not helping them at all by doing that. And so part of what my job is to make sure they have the correct information so they're not over applying it. Because it's not as easy as, pluses and minuses.
Right.
Just because you have a good rate of nitrogen in 1 year doesn't mean it's going to be the same rate and it's going to work well for you in the next year.
Oh, yeah. The seasons change.
Yes. And so do farmers or growers themselves, can they test their soil fertility?
Yeah. So it's a good idea to test your soil. There's been kind of throughout history for soil fertility, there's been a couple of methods for how we've managed recommendation systems. And it used to be we did a lot of yield-based recommendations. Okay. So we'd look at our yield and say, oh, we wish it would be higher, or it should be this or that, and use that to apply our fertilizers. A much better approach, and the approach that most people are using now anyway, is to look at the soil, right? Take a soil sample, send it off to AgVice, and they can, do lots of different analyses. Okay. And say, this is how much we have, how much do we need, right? Because that's going to vary. There's going to be different fields that need different amounts, and there's even going to be variability within a field. This area needs more fertilizer than this area, et cetera, et cetera.
So it could be way more precise. You can know exactly what you need.
Yes.
All right.
So do they use the GPS systems?
Yeah, that's not something I work with, so I don't know a ton about it, but I do know. So the term you're looking for is precision agriculture.
Precision. That sounds nice.
Yes.
Yep.
That is it.
That's a good one.
So here, someone say precision agriculture. That's what they're kind of referring to.
Okay.
So, or that's part of precision.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah, we can adjust our fertilizer rates. Some people will adjust their planting rates as well. So let's say you have higher nitrogen in the area. Well, why not put more corn in that area or more seed in that area? That kind of idea as well. So yeah, there's lots of different ways to do it. And Sarah would be like an expert on that, right?
Okay. Yeah.
That's really what she does, is creating maps and things
I think she tried to teach us about precision agriculture.
Yeah, probably.
She might. We'll rewatch that episode.
I know.
There you go.
She's a smart gal, just like you.
Yes.
So do you think we're...
Oh gosh, I'm terrified for host halftime.
I know. So we do this thing that we call host halftime, where you ask us questions.
And I bet you have some good questions.
I know. I feel like I'm going back to college.
Yes. We've got a professor here.
Again, think of us as 101 students.
I think I made them fair.
Okay, good.
But we'll see.
All right.
Okay, I think we are ready.
Okay, the first question I have for you guys is, how long does it take to form 1 top inch of soil?
Oh.
I think a long time.
In years?
In years.
Okay.
Yes.
1 top inch. I'm going to just...
Okay.
I said 1 billion years.
I said 10,000.
Wow. Yeah. Those are high numbers. So
I think
not high.
Not that high. Okay.
But the lower number wins. So it's 750 years.
Oh, that's nothing. 750?
Okay, so here's the deal. We undershot last episode, and we're just like...
That's what happened.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but no, 750 years isn't nothing. That's significant.
That's a lot.
Okay.
Yes. And so next time you drive down the interstate and you see soil blowing off of a producer's field, think about that.
That's a big
crisis.
deal.
Yeah.
Because how much topsoil do we need?
Well, ideally we'd have as much as we can get.
Okay.
But it's going to be very, very shallow in some areas.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. But
That was a great question.
Protecting the soil that we have is very important too.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So the next question is, in the 1930s, the Great Dust Bowl blew massive amounts of soils from the Kansas and Oklahoma region east.
Okay.
How far did the soil blow?
Oh. Like in miles?
No, like areas.
Where did it end up?
Okay.
All the way to Illinois? Did it blow all the way to...
Okay.
I'm saying that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Just going big today, so...
Hold on. I gotta think about this. This is tough.
Well, now that I think about it, I'm just keeping it.
I don't know. Is that even a thing? Hold on. Hold on.
Jen's changing her answer.
Yeah, okay.
She says Tennessee. I said New York. I thought maybe it went over and up a little bit.
So it actually blew all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. They found some of it on ship decks in the Atlantic Ocean.
What?
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
My
Very, very
goodness.
far.
I don't even know who won that.
What would you say? Who got that point?
I mean, New York is further east, right?
Yeah,
I think so.
Just by a little bit.
Okay, you got
I
it.
think, right? Yeah.
The reluctant.
It's fine. It's fine.
So the last question I have for you, which is great because we talked about anhydrous ammonia. So this last one, anhydrous.
Okay.
So anhydrous ammonia is a common nitrogen fertilizer used today. We already talked about that. The process to make anhydrous ammonia was commercialized in 1910 for production of fertilizer and what other thing? So they made this commercialized for fertilizer and something else in 1910. What was that thing?
To be used on something else?
Yes, to be used for something else.
In 1910. It's a clue. Jen looks so serious right now and I'm nervous.
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know.
I don't even. Oh, that's a good guess. I just was cheating.
I need a
I
blind
don't even
here.
know. I'm sorry.
Cars?
What was it?
The other thing was for munitions for World War I.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh,
A tricky question.
that was a tricky question, but it makes sense.
I know. Should we do a tiebreaker?
So 1910. Okay. What else you got for us? Anything off the cuff?
I know.
Ooh, another question about soils. I have a good one. This is the number one. So
Okay, good.
We like those.
Yep.
How many soil types are recognized in the state of North Dakota?
We've said a lot. 25.
22.
Oh, if you would have multiplied it by 10, you'd be really close. 250 soil types.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
250 different soil types?
So you do have a tough job.
Jeepers.
We ask a lot of our soil experts in North Dakota.
We do. We sure do. There's so much to learn. Well, I'll leave your name on.
Wow. I don't even know if I deserve the trophy, but I'll take it.
I mean, why not? Why not? No, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing your wealth of information on soil fertility.
Yes. We can't wait to see what research comes out from all your studies.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
We forgot to ask our final question.
Yeah, we have one last question.
Yes. So what's your favorite part about being involved with agriculture in North Dakota? And we hear a lot about like the people connection, but is there something else that like you love about working with agriculture here?
Yeah, I mean, the people are great, right? I come from farmers, and that's ultimately why I'm doing research. But something that I specifically am enjoying about North Dakota that's a little bit different from Illinois is just how many challenges are present. It is not like the whole state is facing the same challenges. If you talk about challenges in the eastern part of the state, very different from the challenges in the western part of the state. And as a scientist, that's kind of cool, right? Because you can look at different variables across the state and see how they change. And then it also kind of helps you think more about how we can address those problems and how those producers might address them and move forward with a successful cropping system. So I'm excited by the challenges in the state of North Dakota, and it's been really cool to see just the different areas and how they address those.
The variety.
Yes. We're lucky to have you in North Dakota.
Yes,
Thank
absolutely.
goodness.
Welcome.
I love it up here. It's been great.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us and educating us on soil fertility.
Yes, thank you.
We're smarter because of it.
Yeah. And now I have a great new example about protein that I can share with my students.
There you go.
Perfect.
Yep. I got you.
Right?
Well, very good. Well, that was fun.
Yes. Oof, soil.
I was happy to hear her say that, chemistry and math can be intimidating, because I agree with any field, there's that intimidation, like, wow, that's a hard subject.
And hearing that from a scientist is nice.
But then it's like, all how you apply it. And
it
like
is
if
about
it
the
makes
application.
sense, like, and if you're excited about it makes learning easier. So I think that was good. But man, I didn't know like there was 250 different soil types.
I knew there was a lot, but that's so many.
And 750 years
Which
for
is
1
a long
inch
time.
of topsoil. Holy man. That's
so
a bunch of
we got
years.
to take care of our soil.
Take care of our soil. So that's why we have experts that we learn from, not only Sarah, but,
all of them.
All of them. Yeah. So fantastic. It was. Thanks for watching Common Ground North Dakota. You can find us anywhere that you listen to podcasts or on YouTube.
See you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Common Ground North Dakota podcast. Make sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Most importantly, send us your questions about North Dakota agriculture by visiting our website. You might win a prize. We'll see you in the next episode of the Common Ground North Dakota podcast.